In the last few months, we have seen parents speaking out at school board meetings, in particular Loudoun County in Virginia, against what they believe to be a false indoctrination of their children, and a lot of it, of course, centering around racism of one nature or another. It also had a great deal to do with the outcome of the governor's election and race here this last Tuesday. But there is another indoctrination that has been taught in public schools that goes back almost a century in time. It has been challenged at times, but not quite as vehemently as the issues on racism we've recently seen. What I'm talking about is the subject of creation versus evolution. Evolution is taught as a fact from early elementary grades through high school and college. I remember in the second grade, that would have been about somewhere mid-50s, 52, 3, when I was in second grade. I brought home a book, and I thought it was quite interesting. I was showing my mother, hey, this book and everything, it says here that we came from monkeys and apes. And she, of course, picked up on it right away. And no, that's not true, because she was telling me, because it teaches that there is no God. And but I bring that up because I can recall that far back. Let's see, 6, 7, over to 1953, I guess, when I had that and brought it home from my class that we had there in elementary school at that time. And it was taught that way all the way up until I graduated from high school in 1964, and certainly in college as well. I remember I had a particular college professor, nice fellow, really, and in this one particular class, and he was talking about how that he was trying to blend everything together, because he had a large class. It was a amphitheater type class where everybody's sitting up like this, 100 kids in the class. And he proceeded to say to all of us that everywhere you go on this earth, there's evidence of a worldwide flood. It cannot be denied. Nevertheless, we do know that we have evolved from the apes. And, what a contradiction in one sense. I mean, if you have God, who obviously would have been the source of the worldwide floods he's talking about, he was correct. On our honeymoon, we were married in Wichita, and we honeymooned on our way out to Salt Lake City, first assignment. Stopping in Colorado Springs, we took the trip to the top of Pikes Peak. Now, it was quite interesting. We were going to be looking at 4 different states up there that you could see, but we discovered something else was up there. There were fossils of all sea creatures up there. 14,000 feet, I think it was. Well, how'd they get there? Did they walk up there? No, obviously the whole continent and everything at one time was covered by water. And well, what caused all of that? Who and what was behind all of that? Well, I don't want to I'm just kind of off on a little bit on some of the things here that you recognize and see that the evidence as you travel and throughout this land shows that it cannot just happen the way that it is explained to us, or was when I was in school. The philosophical teaching of evolution is ingrained throughout every area of our culture and society today. Man explains everything about life and existence based on evolution. You ever watch National Geographic? They have some very interesting things on their shows, but it's all explained in terms of evolution, how this animal or that animal evolved from such and such or whatever. We are here today, brethren, because we have proved to ourselves that God does exist and that he is real, that he is not just a religious idea that some people follow. But as a Christian, can we answer some of the major evolutionary arguments that are taught to our children in school, or that we are confronted with on occasions ourselves. Well, today I would like to look at some of the major problems in evolution and also look at some of the major evidences of God. I have recently been giving some sermons in which we have examined doctrinal beliefs in the Bible that are not taught correctly, and that it is important for us to understand how to give an answer for the hope that lies within. And even in this subject, not that one has to be into science, I'm going to try to keep this very simple, but that we should at least not be stymied and feel like we're just on the defense on something like this at all. It should be the other way around. And so I'd like to take a look at some of these things here today. But first, let's ask, does it matter one way or the other? What difference does it make? Does it make a difference? Yes, it does matter. Why? Well, I'm going to start here by going to Hebrews chapter 11, the faith chapter. A couple verses here I want to read. Verse 1 says, "Now faith is the substance of things that is hoped for, and the evidence of things not seen." I don't really care for the New King James or the King James way this is translated or rendered. I've got the Jewish New Testament by David Stern. I think it's more clear what it's saying here, and what Paul, who we believe actually was the author of this book, though he didn't have his name in it. Verse 1, trusting or believing is being confident of what we hope for and convinced about things that we do not see. That makes good sense, I think. Then if you drop down to verse 6, but without faith or belief, I'm going to read both versions, that is New King James, and I'll read also from David Stern. But without faith it is impossible to please him, for he who comes to God must believe that he is, or that he exists, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. Well, Stern puts it this way, and without trusting, he uses trusting in place of faith, or also you could use the word belief or confidence. Without trusting, it is impossible to be well-pleasing to God. Yes, why? Because whoever approaches him must trust or believe that he does exist. Well, how in the world can one come if he doesn't believe that God exists, right? And that he becomes a rewarder to those who seek him out. I thought that was a good way of putting it, and wanted to share that there with you. If there is no God, then we are just the product of time and chance, right? We do not have to give any regard to God or his word. We have no purpose for being on this earth. This life is all there is, and there is no hope of eternal life, right? And that is exactly what I'm going to have a quote here a little bit later from one scientist who basically is saying the same thing. But if God does exist, then we are not an accident. We are meant to be here. There is a purpose for our existence. We are responsible to our Creator. We realize there is hope to live beyond this life. I think we agree with all of that. Now, I'm not here to convince you that God exists. You already know and believe that. But do you know what some of the main things are against that? And what can we say about it? Now, since it does matter, then what are some of the major problems with evolution? Is it science or is it philosophy? Well, we're going to see that it is philosophy. I have a couple books I'm going to read here that they're easy, they're simple, but they get right straight to the point without going into a lot of things that in a scientific way would be over one's head. This first one are 10 things that you should know about creation versus evolution, the debate, and by the author Ron Rhodes. And the first one that he will talk about is naturalism. You know what naturalism is? Evolution rests on the foundation of naturalism. And I'd like to take a look here. I'm going to read here from this book here, page 33. Naturalism is the first thing and one of the first faults or problems with it. Naturalism is a system of thought that espouses the idea that all phenomena in the universe can be explained wholly in terms of natural causes and laws. Nature is the whole show. No supernatural being intervenes in the natural world. Naturalists reject miracles outright. They don't exist. What am I explaining? The philosophy of the atheist, right? The late famous scientist Carl Sagan, in his popular PBS television show Cosmos, said that, quote, "The cosmos is all that is, or ever was, or ever will be." I saw that and remember him saying that. And it's almost like it was a challenge to any and all who had any religious background. Now let me see if you can answer that. And what would you say? Well, naturalism virtually rules the academic world. Its presence is oppressively felt in public schools, colleges, and universities across the country. Naturalism has been called the default position for all serious inquiry and predominates in education, law, the arts, and of course science. Many of today's intellectuals' attack against the Bible and Christianity and creationism are rooted in naturalism, all in naturalism. You read anything of, whether it's in the newspaper about some article, some bone has been discovered or whatever, and what it's supposed to be, the article will all write in terms not only of evolution, but naturalism. That it's just something that all happened at one particular time and came to be. One has to stop and think as we're going along here about life. I had a funeral here a couple years ago, and well, it was for Reggie Peterson, and but a relative was there afterwards at the home where we went to and talking with me, and the person told me, as a colleague, I guess, who he had worked with or was working with, was telling him a little bit about how he felt that, now you, Mr. So-and-so, I'll say, I know you're well educated, and I can't believe that you really believe that the evolution has not brought these things about. And he said, well, I've done some reading, and I do not see how life can come about by no means whatsoever, spontaneously. Just come together in the water. Well, yeah, we have problems with that, this other educated man said. Maybe it was from funnels in the volcanoes in the sea that may have caused some of that. Well, I have said in the past, maybe I can say it now at this time, I would like to see any scientist or group of scientists put together a cell or a group of cells, number one. Put it all together as you best can discover what has to be in it. Number two, you make it come to life. And number three, you make it reproduce itself. Piece of cake, right? Very simple. No, if that could be done, you would have heard about it long, long ago. But no, that cannot be done. Nevertheless, they say that's basically what happened. No God, no intelligence, it just happened like that. Well, let me go on here a little bit more on this. Another book here by an attorney, actually, and, Defeating Darwinism by Opening Minds, Philip E. Johnson, writing about this, also mentions this concerning naturalism. This is one of the problems because it's already determined by, if you're going to accept a naturalism and there is no alternative, you cannot let anything else express itself. But here, Philip Johnson had this to say: evolution is not a fact, it's a philosophy. And I've heard that on TV by people being interviewed who are well respected in the field, and they will say the same thing. Now, materialism comes first, and the evidence is interpreted in light of that unchangeable philosophical commitment. If the evidence seems to go against the philosophy, so much the worse for the evidence. To a materialist, putting up with any amount of bad practice in science is better than to let the divine foot in the door. Now, he was quoting from another person who made that statement. What is the divine foot in the door? God. We're not going to have that. Actually, the person who made that statement originally was Harvard geneticist and Marxist named Richard Lowontin. It is not that the methods and institutions of science somehow compel us to accept a material explanation of the phenomenon